We're doing that. Yeah, there it is. All right. Well, as you probably know, the grants are open and I'm sharing with you these two email addresses for contacting me for help if you need it. The first there is my email address as a state contractor who helps with the cultural and historical support grants. Um, That email address, while it is monitored regularly, is not monitored as often as my pamuseums.org email address, which I check on the weekends and evenings. So if you're looking for a quicker response, sometimes that pamuseums.org address is probably the better of the two. So as I said, the applications are open in the PHMC's and Department of Community and Economic Development's grant system. The information for getting to that application is at this link. We've opened this program a little earlier than usual um, because of problems that occurred last year in making sure that the processing was done in a timely fashion. So last year, the grant applications were approved at the December meeting of the commission of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Um, this year, we plan to have those grants approved at the September commission meeting. This is to allow time for extra signatures at extra agencies. That is what is holding up the grants from last year, if any of you um, hadn't heard about that. Um, so we're hoping that this coming year, these applications will be able to um, get that funding in your hands back in that same time period of March, April, early May that many of us were used to. Yes, the PA legislature is gone for the summer. This is a picture of the very empty Capitol. Before they left, they did raise the grant appropriation in the Pennsylvania budget from $2 million to $4 million, thanks to PA Museums, our lobbyists, and many of you who wrote letters supporting our effort. We have not yet determined how we will um, actually calculate grants for organizations yet. That is always, of course, dependent on how many applicants we have. Um, and we simply don't know that yet. But I am looking forward to building the funding models for a grant program that has twice as much money in it for museums and historical organizations. So what has changed? I made a short list here of some of the changes that you will see. One is the contact signature line item or line on the application. Um, what we found was some of the large organizations in particular, and a few of the smaller ones, were somewhat confused about who was the authorizing person to sign the contracts and the grants and that sort of thing. And since I believe everyone on this call is not a new applicant, you have been in this program before, you can be confident that the person that you have named to be responsible for this grant is, in fact, receiving the communications about them, receiving the contracts, and all of that. Um, so now we have one person at an organization that we want to be the contact on this. That could be the executive director, it could be the development director for volunteer organizations, it could be the treasurer, the secretary, or the president. But that is up to organizations to decide. But do understand that that is the person we will reach out to. The budget for these grants has now changed also. It used to have a drop-down menu with many different categories based on the eligible expenses. What we were finding was um, we didn't really need that as long as the expenses in the budget justification were eligible expenses. Um, so now when you click on the uh, the budget, it will just say support for museum or something along those lines. You won't have to pick from insurance or salaries or utilities. It will be a single box fill in. The questions about the your accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums or your devotion to the core documents and best practices has also been um, shortened quite a bit. We are still looking for that, especially from new applicants. But the reason those questions had been on the application was that there was active legislation that was in the works to restructure the grant program and reward organizations that had completed accreditation or were on the way to doing so. That legislation is now dead. It is no longer active legislation. So we're no longer wanting to collect that information. For those of you who are past applicants, we have that from your past applications as well. So while it still states in the eligibility um, that we are concerned with that, and we no longer ask direct questions about it on the application. The one I think I like the best is that when you hit send on your application, you will now get an email that says that we got it. That this is a first time try on this one. Um, Oftentimes I would receive quite a few emails asking, if we got it because there was no way that you would know that. So we've now built in sort of an automatic email to let you know that it was submitted. I've got a few couple tips for completing these applications and just in general with the grants program, hoping that it saves you and me and a lot of other people some time. Um, One of the things that can hold up a grant contract like nothing else is some outstanding debt or responsibility that you haven't fulfilled to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. For example, filing with the Department of Revenue for your quarterly taxes, reporting on other grants that you receive, whether it's a Keystone Historic Preservation grant or some of our grantees sometimes receive money from PennDOT or the Department of Education, any other grant that you have not filed your final report on may show up as something that blocks the way for your grant to move forward when it's in processing. The final reports that are due next week for the cultural and historical support grants are also an important report. And I communicated that in an email earlier, and I've gotten a lot since. So I think we're going to be in pretty good shape with those. The final reports that are due every July come at the end of the 2-year grant cycle. Even though these grants are annual, the contract that you and the Commonwealth sign off on is for a 2-year period. So the grant funding that you received in 2003 is now coming due on July 31st, 2024. I know we're museum people and we love last minute stuff, but I would say don't wait till the last minute in case there's something wrong with your application and you hit submit and it's not quite right. Um, it- there are reasons to get it done a little earlier rather than later. The deadline for this year's applications is the 23rd of August. Once you submit your application, it becomes very difficult on my end to create a copy of it. So I recommend to people that they print out their application before they submit it if they can, for their files, for one thing. And I started out in the world as a museum preparator, and we always think about what are we leaving for the next guy, um, in terms of information. And if someone else has to fill out a grant application next year, it's good to have the sample of the previous years on hand. Once you submit that grant, in the processing on my end of customer service, every page of the application appears as almost it's a completely different website. So it makes it very hard for me to print that out and turn it into a PDF and provide it to people. You will receive your contract by email to sign and return, and I strongly recommend that you also print that out, before you return it, so that you have a copy of what it is that you have signed electronically. And then, keeping good files around the office on your grants is always important. And you'll want your copy of the application, maybe put on the folder itself what year the funding came. Um, Login credentials are always a good thing to have in that file in case there has to be somebody, who comes in an emergency to do something in your absence. Correspondence about the grants. Um, Occasionally, we will have grantees ask for extensions on final reports or other documents. And it's good to have a record of that having been granted. We don't usually refuse someone's request for an extension on a final report as long as we know it's coming. We call the grantee pool our usual suspects because it's the same pool of people every year. And I think, we know each other pretty well. And for your own records, assuming you have a records retention policy, on the file for your grants, you should probably also have a date, in time at which it can be destroyed, so it isn't cluttering up your place. Um, like some of the other things that we have around museums that end up taking over our file cabinets. We have new license plates. I'm gonna have to get a new one for my graphic on this. Now, going over the timeline, um, again, the deadline to apply is 8/23. It's all contingent on approval from the commission in September. Your signature will be requested on a contract, um, after you receive your letter of notification on your grant. And then it will go off to, different agencies to be signed. The PHMC signs off on it. An office called OGS, the Office of General Services, signs off on it. Then it goes to the OAG, Office of the Attorney General, who signs off on it. Then it comes back to the PHMC and it's sent to the comptroller. Um, and the comptroller processes those grants, anywhere between 2 or 3 days to 30 days. And then the funding will be sent out electronically. We no longer send out checks, as you know. Um, the final reports for these grants that you will receive in 2024, or actually you'll probably receive these in early 2025, will be at the end of 2026. And anywhere along the line with final reports, if you get confused about which grant you're reporting on, please do email me. There's no embarrassment in it. Most of you probably don't have a copy of your contract. Or if you do, you're confused by the 2-year period versus the 1 year funding. So please feel free to ask if that's the case. I'm happy to send those out. And it may take me a few days to do that. Um, but I am in the office 2 days a week, and I send out a lot of contracts on those 2 days I'm in. One way to stay on top of the grant announcements is to keep in touch with us at PA Museums. Um, you can subscribe to our mailing list or send me an email to be added to our newsletter if you aren't already on it. That newsletter goes out every other Wednesday, sometime around noon, because I'm a creature of habit. I'd like to open it up for questions now, if I can figure out which button to do that with.
Rusty, can you hear me?
I sure can.
This is Kelly from the Bucks County Children's Museum. I have three questions. My first two are about the budget. Should we stay within that 2% of our operational budget from fiscal year 2024 when we create our budget? And typically we use the PHMC money to support our DOO's salary. Would it be better if we diversified our budget to show maybe supporting salary and utilities, or does it not matter?
Those are two questions.
Yeah.
Okay. The first question is your budget question. And I usually tell people to use their 990 from that usually the 990 will cross over a calendar year or a fiscal year, or show a snapshot of the budget expenses. So you're using the expense line from the 990. And whether it really it's up to the organization whether they're going to use the year previous or the current year, depending on whether they have their 990 done or not. So looking back at the history of your organization and what number you used, you can kind of figure it out that way. Like, oh, it's this number, not that number. Does that make sense, Kelly?
Yeah, we won't have our 990 for fiscal year 24 done until November.
Yeah.
So you
So
use
yeah, use
use the
that
20.
previous years. Yep.
Okay, got it. And it still stay within that 2% range when we're trying to budget what to ask for.
I would ask for what you think is appropriate. The request number on our end is useful for advocating for increases in funds, but it doesn't it hasn't so far ever really influenced anybody's funding. It gives us a sense of what the needs of the field are. For example, every year we've had $2 million in the grant program. The request amount, if you total it up for all the, say, 160 grantees, usually falls between $7 and $9 million. And we obviously don't have that much. So some people say, well, should I request the maximum? Would that create a picture that is accurate? And I mean, maybe, but no. What would probably reflect reality a little better is, the history of your grant, how much you've received in the past, and then adding in a cost of living.
Got it.
Something like that would probably be the most conservative. Um, I do like when somebody has the guts to just ask for $65,000, because that's the maximum award. You could all just ask for that. You are not going to get it. Uh, but that,
Great.
the
And
other
my
question, the other question about budget, Kelly. I really like to tell people to keep it simple. This grant that you receive is probably not the biggest grant that you get all year, right?
Mhm.
And it has a final reporting requirement. You have to be signed up in the state vendor portal. There are a lot of hoops to jump through. So if you want to keep this one simple, um, keep that salary for your for your staff member as the budget line item and report on that. And don't let this grant become a burden, accounting wise, trying to split out things for different eligible expenses. As long as it's an eligible expense, and it isn't, I am required to flag grants that are requesting money to pay consultants, um, but that rarely comes up. So,
That's the answer that I wanted. Thank you. And
yeah.
my last question is just a technical thing. When you ask for the current registration date for your charitable certificate with state of Pennsylvania, do you want the date that it expires or the date it was issued?
I think the date it was issued.
Okay,
Yeah. For me, that's always mid-May. I don't know if that's the same for you.
not sure, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
Hi, Rusty. It's Emily from the Holocaust Center in Pittsburgh.
Hello.
Hi, I have a couple questions. And I may be making this more complicated for myself. So I went onto the site and I noticed that there was an application already like in the incomplete application, which I don't know if that was left over from last year and when I started or whether it popped in a new one. So so for this process, we just start the begin a new application, or is that old one? Because it had the date as this year, so I just got confused. So if there's something in the incomplete applications, did you guys stick one in there for past recipients, or am I supposed to start a new application?
You should start a new application.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's very easy to create applications in there. And we don't frequently go through and clean out, ones
Okay.
that were started um, that were incomplete or that sort of thing. And this same system is used for other state grants. So, when you start an application, you have an opportunity to call it something. Um, I would use the 2024-2025 Cultural and Historical Support Grant for Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. Like
Okay.
call it what it is, so that we
Right.
all know what it is.
Okay, then that's what I thought, and I'm guessing now it's kind of coming back to me that that's probably why I abandoned that one because last year you probably told me put the date on it, so I know which one it is. Um, our organization is part of a larger organization, and so for the signer, like I'm the main contact for this grant. I'm the one that writes it. I'm the one that does everything, but we have a CEO of the larger organization who serves as the vendor, and she has to actually sign the contracts. Are you saying that that has now changed and I am able to sign the contracts, or does she still need to as the CEO?
As long as your organization is okay with your assignment to do that, yes, you could be the person who does all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Rusty, it's Carol Smith from Fireman's Hall Museum. So I'm going to jump on to that last question because in our case, I'm your contact person, but our bylaws state that only the president of the organization can sign contracts. So is there still a way for me to differentiate that?
I think there could be, as long as you have the internal communication with that person to trigger the activity to do what you need to do to process it.
So just put his or her name on the thing and just have them forward me any questions.
Yes, I think that would work if your bylaws require that.
Yeah,
And
they do.
I don't think that's all that unusual either, Carol.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm sorry I had to mute for a minute. The mailman came and the dog went crazy. Are there any other questions?
Hi, Rusty. It's Amy from Monroe County. How are you?
I'm good, Amy. How are you?
Good. So how does this affect official county historical organizations? We always had the set amount of $4,000. Is that should remain at that?
That is yet to be decided, Amy, and I'm actually hoping to raise the award amounts for everybody. Um, how we do that and what strategies we want to employ, um, that there will be a meeting about that.
Okay. So put, I mean, if
Um,
I have to work on it in the next 2 weeks, just put 4,000 and know that you guys might decide on your own to, is that fair?
yeah, the request amount, of course, is less important than the available amount. Um, and what I think, you know, the spirit of this program was really, um, kind of a lifeline for museums and official county historical societies. So even though many county historical societies are smaller, than eligible museums with budgets under $100,000 a year, it is really important that the PHMC support those organizations and encourage their best practices and help them grow. So I know there's going to be a long talk about this one.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions, nuts and bolts things that you're just wondering about?
Rusty, um,
Hi.
I'm Brenda Applegate from Beaver County, and I was pleased to hear we might get a raise for county historical societies. Does that include the possibility of matching monies, which we had to do earlier, like years ago?
This program has no match requirement.
Okay, very good.
Um, we used to, I remember way back when oftentimes there was a matching grant from the county for county historical societies that was tied with PHMC funding, and that hasn't been the case for some time. There are still some county historical societies that receive that support from their county, though. So it would be great if they all did, if we could make them do that. But the counties do not like when the state tells them to do things.
I know. Trust me, I've been there when I had to have the match, so I appreciate known matches. Thank you.
Hmm. Anything else on anybody's mind? Okay. Well, if there are changes to the application next year, I may include in my slideshow some screenshots of what the application looks like. But I know that everyone on this call, almost everyone on this call, has seen what that application looks like and has completed one before. Um, if you do have any problems along the way, please do feel free to reach out. We tested this system in early July, believe it or not. The new stuff we did put through a lot of test applications to look at and move around. We think it works, but if something doesn't, please do let us know. And I appreciate your time today joining me. It's good to see so many familiar names and hear your voices. So hope you have a good rest of your summer, rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rusty.
Thank you.
Thanks.